2019 Levo, arguably the bike that actually set the tone in terms of the layout of many e-mountain bikes. 700 watt-hour battery, 21 kilos, 29-inch wheels, 150 mil travel. This is AD Nash's bike. AD, why do you like this bike so much?
It's my go-to bike, my old faithful. She's been there for the last 4 years and never let me down. But,
yeah. I mean, some would argue that maybe possibly a better trail bike than the current Levo, right?
Well, I've ridden many nice bikes with you, Steve, and for where I ride it, it's just perfect.
Folks, most of you know that the weak spot of this bike is potentially the drive unit. AD, have you had a couple of drives on this bike?
Yeah, she's had a couple, and this one now is a bit poorly.
Yeah, but the key point to understand here is this bike is certainly not obsolete. There's many years left in it to go. But what we're going to do, we're down here at the eBike Motor Centre in the south of England, and we are going to upgrade and improve and make that motor more waterproof for the cost of less than some derailleurs.
Wow, bring it on.
So we have here a Brose S-Mag motor, 2018 vintage. We're with Pete Collard from eBike Motor Centre down in the south of the UK. There's partners all over the world. Pete's going to give this motor a bit of TLC, a major upgrade to give it a significantly longer life plus a warranty. Pete, take it away.
So the first thing we're going to do is open this motor up and see what's going on inside. See if it needs any repair before we do an upgrade for it. And we're just loosening the belt tensioner. As the cover's not coming off, it's normally a sign that it's got a broken belt. So the belt flicks around on top of itself and then jams against the cover, so that's what makes the cover so hard to get off. So we have a broken belt. We don't know if there's anything else wrong with it yet. We're going to strip out the crankshaft. We've got to upgrade it anyway, so we'll have a look, see what the condition of the bearings are when we get in there. The seal has fallen off the bearing. That's been stuck to the inside of the case. The bearing feels a little bit rough, but it's not too bad. What we're looking for is water ingress, and as we can see, this is the bearing surface for the needle roller bearing, and you can see all the rust on there. There's been water sat in that area. We'd go ahead and check the center crankshaft bearing, feels good, and then make sure that none of the little sprags are going to fall out the sprag clutch bearing. Okay, so this bearing is technically starting to fail. When you're riding, you'll get some cracking and popping, and then normally the bearing fails altogether. This play on the cadence sensor should not be there. This shows that this bearing has been out for some reason. That may be why the seal was so hard against the outer cover of the motor. So it might have had a severe impact on the right-hand side. Okay, so we need to press the torque sensor out of the pulley wheel. Woo. First thing we do is check the right-hand crankshaft bearing, and
that looks rough.
It's absolutely seized. It's escaped. We got plenty more. And you can see that the sprag bearing is absolutely destroyed. There's nothing. So we need to get that out of there. To get that out of there, we need to press this part out of the pulley, and that's the bearing race for the sprag bearing. To do that, we have to take this bearing off. So I'm heating the pulley so that we can push the bearing race out without breaking it. So while it's warm, we get all the old belt out because it releases all the grease that's sticking the belt into the pulley. So here's a destroyed sprag bearing. As you can see, there's no little bars there anymore to hold the sprags in place, and that's why they fail. Bearing race, we check that for damage. This one looks like it's going to be fine. Clean everything up, and change the bearings, and then we'll start upgrading it. So these are some of the parts we're going to put back into this motor. These are upgraded parts. We're going to do a full upgrade, EB UK upgrade, and this will make it a lot stronger, but probably more importantly, a lot more waterproof. So if you're, if you're afraid of the water getting in, which is what's done the damage on this one, this will stop it. So we haven't got time on camera to do a full overhaul with this motor, although it does need it. We are going to change some of the bearings, but we won't show you that, unfortunately. But what we will do is stop on the important parts where we're talking about what's upgraded and why it's upgraded. So we have everything cleaned up now. The first thing we're going to do is fit one of the upgraded sprag bearings. The reason these are upgraded is the sprags are a lot larger, but also the bars between the sprags are a lot larger than the standard one. This tends to suffer shock loads better. It's still not foolproof. Unfortunately, the forces, when a motor suffers a severe pedal strike or a crash, the forces are so great that whatever you put in there is going to fail. So we use a special grease on here. Do not, if you fit this yourself, do not use some sort of special silicone type or ceramic based grease. So we just lightly grease the outside of the bearing, not the inside, and put the bearing back in its race. And we need to put the race back. Need to put a bearing back, or a new bearing. Right, so we're going to upgrade the torque sensor. We've got to take the needle bearing out from inside the torque sensor. But you can see a lip here, and when this is on the crankshaft, water comes in here, this point of the crankshaft, and fills up that gap where that lip was and sits up against the bearing. So what we want to do is try and stop that when we upgrade it. This is what we're replacing it with. So we're putting a rubber seal into the motor before we put the bearing in. This is placed in what would be the wrong way round in most cases. It's to stop stuff coming in the motor rather than stop anything getting out of the motor. We have a special tool that sets the depth when we press this on, so we don't crush the seal. Next, we're going to fill up that space in front of the seal with a waterproof grease. It's a very thick, tacky grease that doesn't get washed out very easily. Next, a thin smear of grease on the sprag bearing surface, and then the sprag bearing. So once that's on, we then have to refit the right-hand crankshaft bearing, and this has to be set at a special depth. It's also very important to get that as square as possible, otherwise when you finish the job the motor will be loose and tight, because this bearing doesn't fit up against anything, it just floats on the shaft. So this is the crankshaft sprag bearing. We've replaced now the drive sprag bearing and now the crankshaft. So this is the one that you turn with your feet rather than the motor turning. Again, same thin smear of grease. If you over-grease a sprag bearing, all the sprag sticks together and then the bearing will slip. We'll just add a little bit of grease for the wave washer. Doesn't need to be pretty. There's our finished crankshaft assembly. We just have to put that back in the motor now. So we use a Vaseline on the drive belt, stated by Brose. This is call it technical Vaseline. As they state in their manuals, coat liberally. cleared the hole for the tension screw so that basically when we torque the tension screw up, it's not going to set the torque driver off too soon. Okay, so we're going to put the cover back on. We want a little tiny bit of Vaseline for this O-ring, and it's really not a lot at all. If you use too much, it will cause problems. Literally just to hold it in place while we put the cover on. Cover's all cleaned up. Put the new screws in. So these are magnesium alloy screws and they are stretch bolts. So technically they can only be used once. You get new ones in the belt kit. And these now have to be torqued and then stretched. The case screws in, torque the bolts. We just need to put a dab of Loctite on the tension screw and tighten that to the desired torque. And we put on our sticker so that everybody knows there's a new belt been fitted. And then one thing we didn't show on camera, but basically we packed this area with waterproof grease or water resistant grease, and then we're going to put X-ring seal on top of that. So that will give us a nice seal. Once the crankshaft, the crank arm has been put back on and torqued up, that will just touch that and hold it in place without adding any extra friction. And we'll do the same on the drive side. The last thing to do is just put the dust seal over the right hand side bearing. If you don't put a bit of grease on here, they can squeak. The spider will actually push this down, but we tend to just seat it so that we know it's right when it goes out. And there we have waterproof motor with 5 layers of sealing before the water can get in on the right hand side, and 2 layers of good sealing before the water can get in on the left hand side. The plugs, especially on the 2.1, are pretty good. They don't normally suffer from water ingress. That's our motor done, ready to go.
So AD, I think, you know, the performance on that Levo is still absolutely up there. There's nothing wrong with that bike, so I think...
Well, there isn't. I've had it for 4 years.
Yeah.
I want to keep it for another 4 years. There's nothing wrong with it. So throwing things away because you want the latest stuff, no. So all you need, any fear you have about having dodgy motors on your e-bikes, second-hand bikes, there you go.
Thanks to Pete Collard at the eBike Motor Centre. Remember, folks, it's not just Brose motors. Pete does Yamaha, he does Bosch, and many other of the main drive units on the market. So, yeah, thanks to Pete.